Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Get down! Baltimore!
What are they getting?
Everything out of me. They gonna get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that.
All right, what is going on, you guys? It is Jake here, bringing you yet another episode of the podcast and yet another, dare I say, banner interview. It's been a banner interview week around here, I'd say, with Jonathan Ogden, who obviously came to your airwaves on Tuesday, the chat between me and him, and obviously briefly Spenny. We had Glenn Clark on Wednesday, which was just an awesome kind of general chat about Baltimore media, some of his great memories, in that whole scene, 2008 season, kind of being that first one that he came back here. It was just a really, really awesome chat with Glenn. So always tough for somebody to follow up a Hall of Famer like J.O., but I think he did a really nice job. And I open this to tell you guys to go back and listen to those if you have not already. This was really an awesome week of content looking back on it. And those two guys, Jonathan Ogden and Glenn Clark, who came to you on Tuesday and Wednesday, are a massive part of it. So closing the week out here today with another episode. This time it's the Ravens-Bills preview. Spenny is with the franchise in D.C. tonight. I believe he's seeing the live KFC radio recording down in D.C. or something like that, so he was not able to make the preview. I think he put out an episode of his own earlier today, though, actually, with him and Cole, doing a little bit of a breakdown of the Patriots game and looking ahead to this Bills game, but we wanted to give you a preview proper, and to do so, I was lucky enough to get in touch with and book Chris Trapasso from CBS Sports. Chris is an awesome dude. He is a draft expert of sorts. He follows and covers a lot of these young players that come into the NFL via his draft coverage. He's just a man on top of it. He's appears on the Pick Six podcast from time to time, which we're big fans of around here. I'm sure a lot of people listening to that are as well. So if you're not familiar with Traps, he is the absolute man. He's a big Bills guy, I believe, from that Buffalo area. So he hopped on with me for about 25 minutes to break this game down. A lot of X's and O's talk and a lot of good storylines and narratives to track heading into this one. So I think you'll really enjoy it. So without further ado, I'll throw it over to that, but not before I give you my prediction in this one. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think Traps is going over the over-unders at certain points in this interview. I think hammer the over. I'm expecting a big one. Even with the rain forecast, I just think they're going to find a way to hit that over, and I'm going to go Ravens win this one 33-31. I think this is going to be an absolute battle of the heavyweights, and any doubts about that we had about the Ravens being a heavyweight after that Dolphins meltdown, I think they're going to kind of answer the bell here this week, just like they kind of did last week against New England. And I think they're going to continue to prove that their identity right now is their offense. It's not their defense, which has struggled even at times last week. I think they're going to be winning some track meets this year, and this is probably going to be maybe one of the coup de grace efforts in that regard. So I got the Ravens winning this thing 33-31, winning as home dogs over the Bills. So there's my prediction. I'm sure Spenny will be putting his out in some form or fashion, maybe on Twitter. Maybe he'll even hop on the podcast feed again. Maybe he already gave it. I don't know. I haven't had a chance to listen. But thank you guys for listening. Here's my interview with Traps. Enjoy it very much, and I will talk to you guys again next week. Thanks. All right, we now welcome on a very special guest. He's joining us here to help break down Bills at Ravens. It's Chris Trapasso of CBS Sports. How's it going, man?
Jake, thanks for having me. This is a fun matchup between the Bills and the Ravens. It feels like, to me, preseason and just what we've seen through 3 weeks for both of these clubs, that these are two of the premier teams in the AFC.
Yeah, it definitely does feel that way. It maybe not so much after that second week with the Ravens, with the meltdown that they had there in the second quarter, and then obviously you'd maybe expect the Bills to be 3-0 at this point, but they had a little bit of a stumbling block last week there in Miami. So I guess start us off with the macro there. How best would you describe this 2-1 start by Buffalo? It's been dominant at times, and then obviously you have the Ken Dorsey moment and everything that happened last week. How would you kind of best describe these first 3 weeks?
I would encapsulate these first 3 weeks by saying that the Bills have played really good football in terms of moving the football on defense, not allowing a lot of long drives, not allowing a lot of big plays. But for the first time, and I know this is kind of the opposite of what's happened to the Ravens recently, but for the first time in a while in the Sean McDermott era, they're dealing with a bunch of injuries all at once. And that's not to say that, I'm taking away anything from the Dolphins from what they were able to do against the Bills, winning by 3 in week 3, or by 2 in week 3. But it was a performance from the Bills that there was literally 4 or 5 backups or third string / practice squad players in the secondary, a bunch of guys up front on defense. Obviously, much was made about the heat index, and the Bills are on the sunny side. I mean, that I didn't really get too much into that because these players do have to deal with adverse weather conditions at times. But I think in general, the Bills and their fans should be pretty happy, very happy with how this team has played, because even in the loss against the Dolphins, they had 31 first downs in that game. And Tua Tagovailoa made one really nice throw down the field. The Ravens know about that, to Jalen Waddle. Beyond that, he didn't really dice this secondary that was loaded with backups, third stringers, and practice squad players, like I said. So the Bills, of course, probably expected or would have liked to have been 3-0 entering this game, and the Ravens were a quarter away from also being 3-0. But in general, they've played very good football, especially recently when they've had to deal with more injuries than they have in a long time.
Yeah, definitely. And Ravens fans definitely can relate to the injury front there. It's an interesting matchup in that respect, because you've got some guys coming back for Baltimore. Ronnie Stanley potentially going to be coming back along that offensive line. We're going to have to see about that, but it sounds like more of a certainty that he's going to be coming back soon, which is a good feeling. You hit on Josh Allen a little bit there. I'm curious what the book on him has been through these 3 games. Everyone got to see him in that week 1 game and then obviously remained dominant against the Titans. I didn't catch as much of the Miami game. What's kind of been the book on Josh Allen so far? Is the MVP campaign still kind of on the rails for you? What's the deal with him this year?
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of why I think this is a game between 2 of the premier teams, the serious Super Bowl contenders in the AFC, because of the quarterbacks. I think Lamar Jackson probably up there with Jalen Hurts as the MVP frontrunner. I don't think Josh Allen is too far behind either of those 2 quarterbacks through 3 weeks. The book on Josh Allen in the first month or almost month of the season in September, he was surgically precise against the Rams, had an over 80% completion percentage in that game. The Titans did not get a lot of pressure on him, and he completely diced that secondary, although that is one of the weaker secondaries in the NFL. And then last week against the Dolphins, and it's really what I think we're going to see on Sunday from the Ravens, the Dolphins just put 6, 7, sometimes even 8 guys on the offensive line and just completely tried to overmatch the Bills blockers with a ton of blitzes. They played a lot of cover 0, and Josh Allen did a pretty good job getting the ball out of his hands. There were a couple injuries up front. A couple guys went out along the offensive line due to some heat and cramping issues that led to him being pressured a lot more frequently than he was in the first 2 games. Still was able to make some plays with his legs, but ultimately fell short because he really did not have a lot of time in the pocket. So entering this season, it was all about Josh Allen, how he's taking, of course, the next step or 2 or 3, but that his improvisation, his running ability was really what set him apart from other quarterbacks. He did have to run a little bit more against the Dolphins than he did in the first 2 weeks, but in general, we've seen a lot more of the dink and dunk, methodically moving the football down the field, Josh Allen, than really what he showed at all over the last 2 seasons when he really broke out and became that elite quarterback.
Definitely. And I think a big part of him being able to do that, obviously, was Stephon Diggs, who, Ravens fans are very familiar with, having played just down the road at Maryland. I think a lot of them to this day, myself probably included to an extent, are a little bit burned by the fact that they couldn't fork over whatever it was to go ahead and get Diggs for Lamar Jackson, because he has been huge for Josh Allen. I'm curious about, he seems like such an all-around great player. He's a guy that Rashad Bateman over here has drawn some comparisons to, I think, very favorably. That's very much a compliment to him. Is there a specific type of cornerback that Diggs has struggled with, to your knowledge? Because the Ravens do have some diversity in that defensive backfield when everyone is healthy.
Not specifically, I think in general, he's done a pretty good job, even against some of the league's better man-to-man cornerbacks. I think when you are going to try to play zone against Josh Allen and the Bills, which I know like the Ravens don't play a ton of zone, Allen and Diggs, the connection that they have to understand when and where to sit down in those voids of the zone, they're very good at doing that. Josh Allen can throw with anticipation through specific windows, but Stephon Diggs has had big games against the Patriots where they played almost 60 or 70% man coverage, and they had J.C. Jackson. They've had some of the league's better man-to-man corners. So I think in general, there's not a specific type. Maybe some of the longer cornerbacks. Xavier Howard did a pretty decent job against him last week. I think he had like 7 catches for 74, 80 yards, something in that range. But it was more about, again, the Dolphins just going extremely blitz heavy and then being able to exploit the Bills' offensive line because of some of the banged up nature of that line that Diggs was not able to get down the field. So there's not really a specific type of corner that's been better. I think the longer press man types, though, have done a decent job, and really 2 of them are in Miami with Xavier Howard and Byron Jones, in just disrupting the timing and the connection that Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs have.
Definitely. Getting into this run game a little bit, Josh Allen is a big part of it. I think you kind of hit on that already a little bit. How have they fared on the ground, sort of besides him thus far? What has he brought to the running game? What does that kind of whole scene look like for them?
The running game has not really been relied upon too much in the last couple of seasons, and this is really a fascinating game for me because I'm someone that's big into the analytics, and I know that the Ravens and the Bills analytics departments, I think, might be the 2 biggest in the NFL, that they're always trying to get edges here and there. The Bills last year, even in 2020 with Brian Dable, and then so far and through 3 games with Ken Dorsey, they have been among the league's leaders in terms of pass rate, first down pass rate, neutral game pass rate, when that scoring margin is between 8 points on either side. So the run game has not really been a major factor. And I think it's almost too early to say that it's been good or bad, because like last week against Miami, they just could not block up front, and they figured, hey, we're going to just let Josh Allen use that extension of the run game, get it out to Isaiah McKenzie, get it out to the tight ends, to the running backs out of the backfield. But I will say, in a more normal game script with more normal conditions, it's probably a weaker part of this offense, that the run blocking has not been great. I think Devin Singletary is elusive. Zach Moss, a little bit of a slower back, brings that power element in those short yardage situations. And James Cook fumbled on his first carry and really hasn't been a big feature in the running game thus far. So when you face the Bills, I think you have to be prepared to see a lot of dropbacks, a high percentage, 60+% dropbacks for Josh Allen. And the run game is not really something that the Bills can lean on, even if they do have a lead later in the game.
Yeah. Right. So this Ravens defense has struggled to get after the passer through these first 3 games, as far as things go for them. So I'm curious what you think they could do to maybe generate some success doing so in this game against Josh Allen. I know you mentioned that Miami kind of blitz type approach. Do you think it's going to be something similar to that against Allen in this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the Ravens. I know their identity, even with their new defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald, is that they want to play man coverage and blitz a lot. Watching the Bills-Dolphins game, like the Ravens certainly have done over the past few days, you could take 2 things away from it and say, hey, look, like they got Josh Allen a little bit rattled, but he completed over 40 passes in the game. He threw for 400 yards, only at 6.3 yards per attempt. But the Bills still move the ball. Like I said earlier, 31 first downs. I don't know if that's what a defense wants. If there is an area for the Ravens to exploit, it's probably the right side of the Buffalo offensive line. They have second-year pick Spencer Brown, who's been in and out of the lineup. He had back surgery over the summer. He actually was coming into his own as a rookie last season. Down the stretch, he was actually pretty good. He was injured. He went out early in that Dolphins game. Then their right guard, Ryan Bates, who they re-signed this offseason, that was kind of this former practice squad guy that ultimately earned a starting role and was good in the playoffs. He suffered a concussion against the Dolphins. So at this point, at time of recording, we don't really know if Spencer Brown or Ryan Bates are going to ultimately play, the backups, as is the case with most NFL teams, the backups behind them are not very good. So the left side of the line with Roger Saffold and Deion Dawkins, and if center Mitch Morse can return, is pretty solid, especially with Deion Dawkins. The right side, though, is definitely exploitable, especially if one or two of Ryan Bates and Spencer Brown can't go.
How would you grade Ken Dorsey thus far, 3 games in, stepping in for Daboll, who is a very high-profile and successful coordinator?
I think he's done a really good job. I mean, the only nitpicking criticism that I have is some of the short yardage situations where it's almost like the Bills have been a little bit in a luxury situation over the past couple of years where they've been in those critical 3rd and shorts, 4th and shorts. Josh Allen can just make a free rush or miss, dive for the first down. He's still done that a few times, but there was a goal line stand by the Dolphins defense late in the 4th quarter that did include Josh Allen missing low on a pass. He kind of like half pump faked and then didn't have enough momentum behind it. But earlier they had like 1st and goal to do. He did a read out where Josh Allen took a big hit. In the Titans game, even though that game was a blowout, early in the game, 4th and inch or 3rd and inches, they had Josh Allen in the shotgun again and tried to run from the shotgun to make that a longer run. So really, that's been the only element to Ken Dorsey that I have not been a fan of thus far, or the only criticism I would kind of throw his way through these first 3 games as an offensive coordinator. But the pass rate to really maximize what this offense can do with Josh Allen has been very good. They've mixed it up with a lot of short passing. They've hit the deep ball when they've had time. So I think he's done a good job acclimating, going from a quarterback coach to an offensive coordinator.
Definitely. And I guess we can switch over to the defense from there. What does the addition of Von Miller look like through these 3 games? Because he was kind of the high-profile signing to a lot of people for this team this past offseason.
Yeah, he's been superb. I mean, he, in terms of just rushing the quarterback, he has been super efficient. I will say last weekend against Teron Armstead, who's one of the best left tackles in football, Miller wasn't as big of a presence, but the first 2 weeks, and that's against less offensive lines, or especially lesser left and right tackles in Los Angeles and Tennessee, Von Miller was borderline unblockable. He's been good against the run as well. The one thing that was kind of a storyline during the offseason after the Bills signed Miller, that Miller was kind of saying that he heard that the Bills rotate a lot. And over the last 3 or 4 years, Buffalo will have 7 or 8 guys that play at least 30% of the snaps along the defensive line. And like no one plays over like 60% of the snaps. That's really just how Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier run the defense. So Von Miller's, when he's on the field, he's been outstanding, but you're just not getting 60, 75 snaps from Von Miller a game because the Bills want to keep him fresh for later in the season and hopefully the playoffs.
Let's say the Ravens have to go to Daniel Falele to start this game at left tackle. What can they do to help him against Von Miller? Because that, on paper, is a very, very big mismatch, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, they definitely would need to chip with the tight end. Certainly the Ravens are accustomed to utilizing multiple tight ends, and it's not just Mark Andrews in that offense. Because I think that specific matchup with Falele being as big as he is, and Von Miller being smaller and still being able to bend and dip around the corner as well as any edge rusher in football, I think that's an immediate mismatch. And what's kind of helped the Bills not need to blitz very much. They've only blitzed 3 singular times in 3 games, and they still generated a fair amount of pass rush, is that Gregory Rousseau and some of the other reinforcements, former second-round pick Boogie Basham, former second-round pick A.J. Epinesa, some of the guys in the middle have kind of reaped the benefits of Von Miller getting extra attention, and they've just played better, and they've shown some of that maturity that the Bills were looking for. So this is a somewhat underrated defensive line that there is Von Miller, but beyond that, I think going into the season, maybe people in Baltimore, national media, were not really sure about who else was going to step up. But Gregory Rousseau on the other side, even if there is a mismatch and the Ravens have to kind of chip with a tight end or a running back, Gregory Rousseau, Boogie Basham, AJ Epinesa, those other young edge rushers have actually played well in kind of, again, a limited role in these first 3 games.
Right. So Matthew Stafford Ryan Tannehill, Tua Tagovailoa, 3 quarterbacks that are all good in their own right and are off to a good start, but I think they're facing a different animal in Jackson here. What do you think that they're going to have to do to try and contain Jackson in this one? And what have you seen against those other 3 quarterbacks that you might employ that would help stop him?
It's tough, man. I wish I had the answer to that. I would probably be on a coaching staff if I had the answer to that, because Lamar Jackson is playing. I've watched his film. He's doing remarkable things that we were expecting, that everyone was expecting, with his legs, in the design run game, when things break down as a scrambler. And I've been a Lamar Jackson believer since he was coming out of Louisville. He was my number 2 quarterback in that draft class in 2018. But I think that even Ravens fans probably wanted more from him as a pocket passer, and they have gotten that in these first 3 games. I think the Bills, being a truly nickel-based defense, I know we hear that in today's NFL all the time, but the Bills like to use nickel more than any other team in football. They're going to probably stay with that and keep as many defensive backs on the field in case Lamar Jackson can break contain and get outside. You don't have a linebacker there. You have a nickel corner or a safety, someone that's a little bit smaller and faster. I think with him as well, the signing of Xavier Rhodes could maybe give the Bills a little bit more coverage versatility. That Xavier Rhodes spent time in Indianapolis, very zone-heavy defense, but he came into the league in Minnesota as a very man coverage specialist. So I think the Bills could maybe try to, one side of the field is zone, one side of the field is man, with Xavier Rhodes into the mix at this point. But it's really difficult to say, hey, this is the exact game plan to stop Lamar Jackson, because just everything that he can do in all phases.
Yeah, a big part of it, I think, with the passing game in particular, is trying to stop a talent like Mark Andrews, who kind of feels like uncontainable at this point. And you get Jordan Poyer showing up on the injury report. I'm curious if he would be maybe the designated Andrews stopper, if there is one. Who's kind of the guy that you'd be looking to take that assignment?
Yeah, so Jordan Poyer, it was kind of a surprise that he didn't play against the Dolphins. He popped up on the injury report. I don't believe he was injured in the Week 2 game against the Titans. His safety mate, Micah Hyde, suffered a herniated disc in his neck, so he's out for the season. If Jordan Poyer can play, I think he will get snaps against Mark Andrews, but this is a game in which, not that I expect Mark Andrews to be shut down, but I think where the Bills go in with a little bit more confidence in covering an elite tight end, because they have Tremaine Edmonds, and being 6'4", 250 pounds, he's similarly sized to Mark Andrews, and he has experience in big games against Travis Kelce. Now, in a lot of those games, Travis Kelce got the best of Tremaine Edmonds, but I think the size ability, or the ability that Tremaine Edmonds' size brings to maybe help in those contested catch situations where a 6'1" Jordan Poyer, or 6-foot Jordan Poyer, is not going to necessarily win those matchups. I don't think the Bills will utilize one specific player. They'll certainly have Poyer on him. I think linebacker Tremaine Edmonds will see a lot, and even Matt Milano, who's much smaller but can probably match Mark Andrews in terms of agility, stop and start capabilities. I think the Bills will really rotate to just try to throw a bunch of different types of players at, to me, the best tight end in football, in Mark Andrews.
Definitely. And I guess if they are able to take him away, I'm curious just sort of your general thoughts on this Ravens wide receiving core right now. Off to a pretty surprisingly good start, I would say, even to a lot of Ravens fans. What do you think they can do to have a big game in this one if Andrews is kind of taken away?
It probably hit the big play over the top. The Bills with Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, which last week against the Dolphins was the first game since 2017 that the Bills did not have Jordan Poyer or Micah Hyde on the field. That's how durable they've been, and how fortunate the Bills have been that they haven't gotten injured. In that stretch over the last 5 or 6 years, the Bills have been like the best team in the NFL in terms of limiting big plays. That is probably the foremost tenet of Sean McDermott's defense and Leslie Frazier's defense. The Ravens are going to face Damar Hamlin, who was a 6th-round pick in 2021, Jaquan Johnson, who was a 6th-round pick in 2019 at the safety position. Rashad Bateman is deceptively fast. I loved him coming out of Minnesota. And of course, Devin Duvernay ran in the 4.3s coming out of Texas. So I think it would probably be not trying to dink and dunk your way down the field, because the Bills have good coverage linebackers. Taron Johnson's one of the best nickel corners in the NFL. It would be exploiting the outside corners. Dane Jackson, who was a 6th-round or 7th-round pick in 2020, may be back from that neck injury. They don't have much else at the cornerback position outside of Kyer Elam, the first-round pick rookie. And they have 2 career backup safeties or young backup safeties where I think they would be exploitable down the football field with the speed that the Ravens have at receiver.
Definitely. And I guess this Ravens run game, kind of similar to their pass rush, it's been inconsistent at very best, but weirdly, it felt like they kind of found something in that second half against the Patriots. It looked like they sort of went to the counter bash. They got things going a little bit with Justice Hill getting the ball with their explosive options. What is one thing you think Greg Roman could do to unlock that portion of things in this game, get that run game going for 3 or 4 quarters?
That's a good question. I think what's been interesting in just me watching it is, like you mentioned, Justice Hill is kind of like a different style of running back than what the Ravens have had when they've been so good on the ground in the Greg Roman era. They've usually had a J.K. Dobbins, a Gus Edwards, bigger, more powerful back. I think with Justice Hill, you have more speed on the football field. The Bills' run defense is pretty good. They're a little bit banged up on the defensive line. They're not going to have their big penetrating nose tackle Jordan Phillips for this game. He's more week to week than day to day in terms of his injury. But they do have some more reinforcements up front. I think it would really just to have a strong start for Lamar Jackson, where the Bills are really more concerned about the downfield passing game, grab a safety out of the box, and that could really open up all the complexities and the intricacies that Greg Roman has with that running game.
Definitely. So I guess I'll close you out here. Answer me this question. For the Ravens to win this game, I think surprisingly, they're home underdogs and get to 3-1. They're going to have to do blank.
Hit big plays over the top, because I think the Bills will move the ball against this secondary that I know is also pretty banged up. Marlon Humphrey's coming back. Marcus Peters kind of working his way back as well, but has been pretty vulnerable in these first 3 games. I think the Bills are going to move the ball. They're probably going to score points. And like I mentioned earlier, the one area that is exploitable is the safety position for the Bills. So if the Ravens win this game, I don't think it's going to be Lamar Jackson having 12, 13, 14 play drives. It's going to be 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 30 or 40 plus gains in the passing game. Maybe sprinkle in a long run from Jackson or Justice Hill as well, because the Bills are going to move the ball and they're probably going to score 20 plus, maybe even closer to 30 points in this game. So to win, they got to hit those big plays that teams have not really been able to do against the Bills, but they are without their star safeties in Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer.
Definitely. So I guess I can ask you right then and there, what do you think is going to happen in this one? Can I get a score prediction? High scoring. What are you thinking here?
Well, the over-under is, I believe, 51. And last week, everyone thought that the Bills-Dolphins was going to be crazy high-scoring because of the Bills' injuries and just how well Josh Allen has played. The 97-degree heat, a lot of injuries, a lot of fluky things happened in that game that ultimately never materialized. This game, I think, is going to be high-scoring. I think Lamar Jackson is playing too good of football to get shut down by a very reliable Bills scheme defensively, but is a scheme without its star player. So I think at home, I think the Ravens do get it done. It's going to be close because these are 2, again, powers of the AFC. If this game was in Buffalo, I'd probably flip it the other way around, but I think somewhere over 51 total points, something like 31-27 Ravens. I think because the Bills don't have those star safeties and are not fully back to health, especially on the defensive line. Like I mentioned, the cornerback situation is still a little bit murky. We're going to see a lot of points, a lot of yards, and a lot of quality play from these 2 MVP candidates in Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson.
Love it, man. Well, the Bills are always going to be the winners of the tailgating scene anyway. So, that's a massive feather in their cap. But all right, man. Well, I really appreciate the time jumping on here with me. A little bit last minute, we pulled this together. So appreciate the time very much. How about you let our listeners know where they can find you, your work, your social media, all that before we get you going?
Well, Jake, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. I'm on CBSSports.com writing about the NFL draft and mostly now in season writing about young players. Go to cbssports.com/NFL/draft. Or what I always tell people, just Google CBS Sports, Chris Trapasso. The first link that pops up is a link to my archive on CBS Sports, constantly updated. I write an article every day at CBS Sports. You can find all of my writing there. And I'm big on TikTok too. I post a lot of film videos on TikTok, so you can find me on there as well.
There you go. You got the young ones tuning in. I love that.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
All right, you the man, Traps. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jake.
See you.
Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Get down! Baltimore!
What are they getting? Everything out of me. They gonna get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that.